All right, thank you guys so much for joining the Greater Baltimore Climate Summit web series, first webinar of the year, and we have the most incredible subject matter experts to talk to you today about the legislative overview. Session has already started and it'll be going through April. And what are the issues and the topics that concern us the most in the environmental climate community? We're going to get an overview of that today. First, I want to just say, hey, I'm Karee. I am the CEO of the Cloud Sea Thorn Foundation, which houses the Greater Baltimore Climate Summit. Just want to tell you a little bit about us and what we do. Next slide. So a lot of you I know have been to the summit. We had our first summit in 2024 and we had our second in 2025. The initiative is all about bringing awareness to the most pressing environmental issues in the region, highlighting funding opportunities and finance opportunities, which Rebecca and Marissa are going to go through today from a legislative perspective, and also, most importantly, creating a safe space to discuss challenges across different sectors and different communities. Next slide. Just a little bit about the impact that we've been able to create over the last maybe 18, 19 months. We were able to plan the first summit in less than 90 days. We had over 300 participants, and we were able to coalition 22 partners, including the folks that you guys see there on the screen. We are deeply, deeply grateful to all the partners, including the Maryland League of Conservation Voters, who have supported us. And we are also grateful for our co-organizers with the last 2025 Summit, MDE, NASEM, Baltimore Climate Tech Meetup, Lemon Tree Productions, and Co-Collective. If you want to learn more about our impact, you can definitely visit our website. I'll put that in the chat. And then here, again, is a shout out to all our partners. We really couldn't do the work that we do without our partners. We are a grassroots organization. We have not yet received, well, actually, we have received a grant, but we haven't really been a grant-focused organization. So a lot of the work that we're able to do is through our wonderful partners. So we appreciate them. And with that, I want to kick it over to one of our favorite partners, the folks at Maryland League of Conservation Voters. I believe I'm going to kick it over to Marissa first.
Thanks, Karee, and thank you for having this webinar and for everything that Greater Baltimore Climate Summit has been doing. We've really appreciated partnering with you in this work. So to tell you a little bit more about Maryland LCV Education Fund, we have a vision for a healthy environment for everyone in Maryland. I imagine if you clicked into this webinar today that you probably also share that vision, and maybe you see yourself as part of our mission. We are trying to activate and educate Marylanders to promote and pass equitable laws and policies for clean water, healthy air, and a resilient climate. And that is what brings us here today to talk to you about some of these things. So as a quick overview of our agenda for today, we've had our introductions, and we're going to launch into an overview of the 2026 Maryland legislative session that we are now in. And we want to cover some key climate, energy legislation, budget, and environmental justice bills that are coming up that we think you all should know about and may want to get involved with. We'll have a question and answer at the end after those presentations with all of our presenters. And then if there's time before the hour is up, we will go out into breakout rooms so that we can talk to each other about what we've just heard, have some networking, some reflections, and then have a quick final wrap up all together. So let's get into that. To begin, the Maryland General Assembly has their 90-day legislative session from January to April. It just started, and in fact, we are on today, the 15th day. Well, no, we're not the 15th day yet, but we are on, we're before the 15th day of the legislative session. And as you see on this slide, the governor has to introduce his budget bill by then. Well, just now, 6 minutes ago, the governor has introduced his budget bill. So after this webinar, we can all pop over and find the budget book and take a deep dive into Maryland's budget. As the session continues, The reason that we bring up budget is because it is actually the one and only requirement of the legislature is that they pass a balanced budget. So by the last day of session, that that will be the one thing that's happened. But we all know there are all sorts of other pieces of legislation that they will be looking into. Bills get introduced through the beginning of session, and then come crossover, that's when bills need to have either passed the first house that they're introduced in, either the House or the Senate. And then if they have passed those bodies, then they cross over to the other body for consideration there. And then we make it into the end of session, and hopefully all of the priorities that we're going to talk to you about today will have made it through. This legislative session, there are a couple, I want to lay the groundwork for a few of the things that we're looking at. So what to expect in terms of major issue areas that are going to be covered. We have energy, specifically how to mitigate the escalating costs to consumers, and housing, mainly Maryland, we know, needs a greater quantity of affordable housing. So those two issues, and affordability is sort of the main driver of those, will be a key part of the session. And then the budget. And if you joined us last year, you remember that the budget was also a big part of the talking points last year, because once again, Maryland is facing a budget shortfall. So that means that there's something like $1.5 billion that the General Assembly has to decide where it's going to come from, and determine how they're going to adjust funds, making up for that shortfall to get to a balanced budget by April. Major driver of that budget, the budget shortfall this year, has been the change in the federal landscape. Maryland, as you know, has a significant percentage of our workforce working either for the federal government or in related jobs. And as a result of the Trump administration policies that really changed employment in the federal government when they came in last year, that has made quite a financial impact on Maryland. Additionally, we've seen a clawback of grant funding, including grants in clean energy deployment, in environmental justice, and in climate resilience projects. And there was a reconciliation package that the U.S. Congress passed last summer. And as a result of that, the state of Maryland is going to be starting to prepare for additional obligations to maintain programs like Medicaid at the current levels, although a lot of those provisions won't happen until FY27, so we'll be back here again next year. Importantly, also, the federal government has shown under this current administration that they are not a reliable partner for many of the programs that Maryland would have previously received support from the federal government for. And this now changes the calculations that have to be considered when balancing the budget. And two last notes back here in Maryland, we've had changes in House leadership. In December, Delegate Adrienne Jones, who had been our House Speaker, resigned from that position. She's staying in the House, but is no longer serving as Speaker. So during a special session, our Delegate Joseline Pena-Melnick was elected by the House as their new Speaker. And with that change in leadership, there's been a change in House committees. Pena-Melnick decided to establish an additional committee in the House. We now have a Government, Labor, and Elections Committee. And with that change, that shifted which committees are seeing which policy areas, and the energy policy has been shifted out of economic matters and into environment and transportation, which for our matters means that Rebecca, who you'll hear from later, is just going to be spending a lot more time in the Environment and Transportation Committee room this year. And finally, let's not forget that this is an election year here in Maryland. And so, for the governor and for all of our legislators, they're going to be looking to put a feather in their cap this session, if they can, to go out on the campaign trail with things that they can proudly say that they got done in this legislative session. So, we can look forward to all of that. Now, today we're going to talk about four key issue areas, three bills, and also our clean energy efforts. And to start that off, I want to pass this to Shoshanda Campbell, who's joining us from the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, and she is going to talk about the Cherish Our Communities Act. Hi, Shoshanda.
Hi, thank you, Marissa. You can go to the next slide. I am Shauna Campbell. With the South Baltimore Community Land Trust. Also sits on the Steering Committee for Magic, and we have been really working to create the Cherish bill to make sure that it get passed this session. This picture that you see here is of our beautiful community of Curtis Bay in South Baltimore, but you see a lot of things like we have medical waste incinerators, we have an open air coal pile, we have over 200 diesel trucks that's coming in and out on the block regularly. And so it's just a lot. And these are all some of the students that have been doing some of the research about the impacts that's happening in the community. You can go to the next slide. So the nitty-gritty behind the church bill is that when we are looking at permits, MDE is looking at permits, they're looking at them in their silos of what their threshold of what they're going to be permitting into the air is. But what they're not accounting for is cumulative impacts. They're not accounting for all of the multiple facilities that surround that particular facility in the community. So in South Baltimore, we have over 70 stationary polluting industries that's sitting there, and that's only the ones that's being permitted. It's more than that if you're looking at the ones that don't need permits. And so we really wanted to address that concern in communities because, again, when it comes to our health, that's not just being impacted in its silo, that's being impacted as a collective in your system. And so we really need policy to match that reality. And this bill has been very informed by people on the ground. It's being led by communities on the ground that's been dealing with a lot of environmental injustice in their communities and the fear of what it really means for their health and what it means for even their community existing, staying existing. We have seen in South Baltimore three communities that have been washed away because of pollution. And it's not only in South Baltimore, this is a thing that's happening to a lot of communities around the world. So we really came together to make sure that this bill addressed that concern of cumulative impacts. The main point of this bill is that first of all, it has engagement with the community. So when these facilities are trying to get permitted, they have to have these meetings with communities to talk about their impacts, and community get to engage with them around that also. But the part that we are really excited about is that you can no longer just keep adding to the communities that have high EJ scores. We are looking at this bill to be able to actually just deny those permits outright, looking at new facilities and expansions in existing facilities already that we have. So it just give MDE that authority to say no. Basically, you cannot keep adding to this community that's already facing a lot of cumulative impacts. And so we are super excited about that. I think one story that I like to tell is when I was in high school, there was a proposal to build another incinerator that was going to be the nation's largest incinerator. It was going to be built less than a mile away from my school at the time. And there was no bill to stop this. And remind you, we already have the Bresco incinerator that burns half the amount that that one would have been burning. And we already have a really high EJ score. And we had to get out there and we had to go and march. We had to fight. We had to do all this stuff to preserve the rights to just have clean air. And that should have never been. We should have had a bill that said this is not okay to keep adding to this community that's facing these impacts, that's already dealing with a lot of health issues. And so we're really just looking for this bill to pass this session, hopefully to respect these communities and not just say that they exist, but to actually stop the harm that's continuously happening in these communities without keep adding to them. And so that's the part of the bill that we're really excited about and just holding these facilities accountable to the communities that they're in. I know one time I was at one of the meetings before with one of the new facilities that's trying to come into South Baltimore right now, and they were like, "Hey, we're just trying to live. We're just trying to come here. There's a lot of other facilities too." So it's just like it just didn't matter because like there was already these existing facilities that they were like, you should go worry about them, and they all point hands at each other when things are happening. So we just really need to make sure that cumulative impacts is what's being addressed in policy. And so that's the real part of the bill that we're super excited about. And I guess I'll pass it to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Shonda. And the first cumulative impacts bill in Maryland was introduced in 2014. So it's not a new concept.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot since then, and there's a lot of those learnings are incorporated into this like very streamlined bill and approach. And we've been working really closely with MDE on this one, and Marissa talked about the budget and making sure that the bill itself is a meaningful change in the way that we permit in the state that will improve community health, but that also respects the fiscal constraints that the state is in. And that's been a big effort. And I'll get into a little bit the Public Service Commission side of things when we talk about Power Maryland Forward. So that's a big priority bill for Maryland LCV. We work closely as part of the Mid-Atlantic Justice Coalition to bring it forward. So thanks, Shonda. I'm going to talk a little bit about our other priorities, including the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act. So TCA, and we'll take questions at the end. So if you think of them now and you want to put them in the chat, please do, so that we don't want you to forget them in case you have them now. I saw Maria pop on. I didn't want to miss a question. She's been a real champ on the Cherish Act as well. So thanks, Maria. So TCA, look, transportation is the largest source of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in the state, accounting for about a third of our emissions. So we need policy that looks at reducing those emissions. I always say that the largest source of emission also means that there is the largest potential to reduce those emissions. And we see that through vehicle electrification. Maryland LCV's CHISPA program, our Latino outreach program, has really led on a healthy, Clean Buses, Healthy Niños campaign on electric school buses. And so so we've done a lot of work in terms of reducing emissions from the transportation sector. This bill is in that vein. And looks at the way that the Maryland Department of Transportation spends money on highway projects. And if there's a large highway project being proposed, really taking a close look and making sure that if it's necessary to do that, there's equal, mitigating investments in things like public transportation, clean public transportation, mass transit, walkways and bikeways and pedestrian investments. And so we think about it's encouraging the state agency to spend money in a way that is aligned with our climate goals. And we spend money so that it's in line with our climate goals, because our climate goals, if in the climate pollution reduction plan, if we stick to the climate pathway and actually achieve our emissions reductions of 60% by 2031 and net zero by 2045, we are going to save the state hundreds of millions of dollars in health costs. We are going to add jobs and we are going to build our economy. And the balance sheet is tricky that way because they're upfront investments that we're talking about years of savings. But really, we have our climate goals in place so that we can improve quality of life across the state. And in particular, we see that in health outcomes. And TCA gets us, reflects the all of government approach that the Moore Miller administration has committed to for our climate, to achieve our climate targets. So that's TCA. And SEEF, so the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. You heard from Marissa. Today's budget day. Right before this webinar, there was a press conference. The governor released the budget, his proposed budget. And the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, this is something we're going to be thumbing through the pages later to see where this landed. But the Strategic Energy Investment Fund is a fund in the state budget that is mostly funded. It's not funded by taxpayers. So the money in there is from things like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and a large chunk of it, a growing chunk of it, is from alternative compliance payments, or ACPs, which are what the utilities pay in when they cannot meet our renewable portfolio standard requirements. And so instead of meeting the requirements, if they're falling short, reaching our renewable energy goals, then they pay into this fund. That fund has been growing. That indicates a systemic issue going on with making sure enough clean energy is coming online. But nonetheless, that money is currently growing. And as that money grows, the Strategic Energy Investment Fund is a very attractive pot of money to potentially use to balance the budget, which is what we saw happen last year when the intended use of the Strategic Energy Investment Fund is climate and clean energy programs. And again, investing in those climate and clean energy programs like energy assistance, like weatherization, really makes a difference in energy affordability and the quality of life, particularly for low to moderate income Marylanders. And so we have a proposal to put, really safeguard a minimum amount of that funding in the Strategic Energy Investment Fund to make sure it goes to the programs that it was designed to support. And if you think about things like the state's green banks and investing in the Maryland Clean Energy Center, that's an example where you can leverage public dollars with private investments to, make more out of every state dollar for these types of investments. So those are the things we're looking at when we talk about climate investments, paired with environmental justice initiatives like Justice 40 and making sure that 40% of those funds at least are going to low to moderate income households and overburdened and underserved communities is an important part of this fund. So that's CEF. And then Power Maryland Forward. Okay, so we got Cherish, we got TCA, and we got CEF, and those are all sort of legislation, one piece of legislation. Power Maryland Forward is a framework that Maryland LCV is using to support energy affordability through the deployment of solar and storage, the cheapest, fastest sources to deploy today, defense against more fossil fuels and unchecked utility profits while getting the most out of the electricity grid we have. So what does that mean? What does that look like? There are bills that do exactly these things being introduced this legislative session. So, for example, the Affordable Solar Act looks at the way we're doing solar financing to get more solar on the grid, establishing a balcony solar program. So, for example, we've worked really hard on community solar to make sure that people who can't put solar on their roof can have an affordable way to power their homes with solar. Another way to do that is something that I think we learned a lot about from Germany, and now they're doing in Utah, it's called balcony solar or plug-in solar. We have a panel and you can actually put it on. If you're a renter in an apartment, you can put it on your balcony, tilt it towards the sun, and plug it into a regular outlet. And what that's going to do is not offset your entire usage, but it may offset an appliance. It'll be able to reduce your bill slightly, and it will. It's a cheaper, smaller scale solution, and particularly could help folks who just can't put, whether it's because they're renting or because they don't have a roof or because it would, cost too much to upgrade the roof to get the solar. It's a smaller scale option to help get more clean energy on the grid. And then data center demand capacity. So we know that the demand for electricity is increasing at the same time these prices are spiking. And that's in large part, from these large load users or data centers, which are anticipated to come online across the grid. And so when that happens and when we see a big increase in demand, our regional grid operator adjusts prices accordingly. And that's why we're seeing, these spikes in prices, in part because of this anticipated demand from these large load users. And so what this does is require the data centers to reduce energy. Sorry, it's a voluntary program, not required. Reduces energy demand at peak times. So that means when, you can imagine when people get home at 5 o'clock, everybody turns on their lights, plugs in their cars. There's a bit of a spike in demand, and we can ask the data centers to cut use at some of those times, and they can be run by backup batteries, for example. So it requires data centers to bring 25% of their capacity from clean energy and then offering incentives for those who want to bring more. I'm not offering a trademark or anything, but we'd call this bring your own clean energy, or Beyonce, the Beyonce element of this bill. And so I think everybody can get behind that. So that's the Data Center Demand Capacity Act as part of Power Maryland Forward. We also have advanced transmission technologies. So that's getting the most out of the grid we have. There's things we can do to upgrade all the wires that are on our grid, to make sure more power can actually run through them, instead of building new transmission lines. So instead of just saying like, hey, we need a new one, it's saying, hey, let's take a look at what we got and upgrade it before we decide that we need a brand new one, which is way more expensive, which we're all going to pay as ratepayers. And then finally, utility transparency. So that means things like changing the rate of return for utilities and capping executive pay, because a lot of the things that utilities do, they can pass through to ratepayers. Okay. When they build their infrastructure, they're passing it to ratepayers. That's how they make their profit. It's how it's designed. The Public Service Commission regulates that. But anything that a lot of things that utilities do, they can pass to ratepayers, and capping some of those costs can reduce our costs. And also hearing about an initiative to require utilities to join PJM. PJM is our regional grid operator. Utilities are members. Right now it is voluntary. When they join, they get an incentive, like a bonus to join, which guess who pays for that? We're all giving them a bonus for voluntarily joining our regional grid operator. So if they are required to do so, it takes out that adder, that bonus, which means we got one less thing to pay for. So it's a great sort of initiative to make sure that we're paying less and the utilities are doing what they're supposed to be doing. There is a piece of Power Maryland Forward that's defense against fossil fuels. And this is where today the Cherish Act and Power Maryland Forward are really working together, because this is not a theoretical issue anymore. We've heard about bringing more gas onto the grid. You'll remember that last year, maybe not, but I certainly think about it all the time, the Next Generation Energy Act passed. A lot of good things passed in that, including taking trash out of our RPS. A lot of folks on this call worked really hard on that for a really long time. Great. A lot of other good things in it. Charging large load users special rate. There's a lot of good things in it. The thing that stayed in there, though, was a fast track permitting process for bringing new energy generation on the grid. The way that the language was written in the bill, that fast track process was always going to favor fossil fuels. Now we're seeing that play out at the Public Service Commission in a docket called PC 74. In that docket, there were 5 initial applications. The 2 that are moving forward are conditionally approved by the Public Service Commission are for gas plants. One 150 megawatt gas plant and one 564 megawatt gas plant. The quick math on that is 714 new megawatts of gas being proposed in the state of Maryland in a census tract that has an EJ score of 81.8. It is also overburdened and it is also underserved. And it's in Perryman near the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. And so that's what we're looking at, a potential 714 new megawatts of gas in the state of Maryland through a fast track permitting process. Without passing the Cherish Act, the Public Service Commission, while it does have some additional public participation requirements because the EJ score is high, they consider things like climate. They're required to, but they don't have the authority. They don't have in law the ability to say no based on environmental justice, and they don't have the ability to methodically look at environmental justice or the cumulative impacts of surrounding facilities, which there are many, which is how you end up getting an EJ score of 81.8. And the Cherish Act wouldn't do that. It would require the Public Service Commission as part of the CPCN application to look at what else is going on before making a decision on that additional permit. So that's how these things are all connected. How can you all get involved? So please stay engaged. I think on the next slide, we have some opportunities for that. And I'm going to put some links in the chat for this. Tomorrow evening at Patagonia, you can attend Pints and Policy, where you can continue this conversation. I would encourage you all, not only tomorrow, but you can join us in Annapolis next week at the Environmental Summit. The new speaker will be addressing the crowd. So if you want to hear from her directly, Marissa talked about some of her initiatives earlier, but she'll be addressing a crowd on January 28th in the evening. And then immediately following that is Green Drinks. And I'll put all the registration links in the chat. And then that's a great day to come and show your support, our collective support for these initiatives. And then we have Maryland LCV invites you all to join us on our lobby day on February 16th. Again, we will shortly put the registration links in the chat. And then super excited that Curry already announced Greater Baltimore Climate Summit date for this year. So November 12th, mark your calendars. And so those are some really important upcoming events. And I think, Curry, you added one more on the next slide.
Maria, we're not hearing you. We see you again, but your sound isn't coming through.
Is that for me?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yes.
Okay, cool. So, oh my goodness, I can't thank you guys enough for all the nuggets and the gems that you just dropped. But I do want to just talk about this event that's coming up at IMET on February the 7th with the EJ icons, Fred and Vernice Miller Travis. It's going to be a really, really cool event. The movie is really cool. I did put a link in the chat for the CCTF events, and the link for this event is also in that rolling link. But back to Shashonda, Marissa, and Rebecca, appreciate you guys so, so much for just bringing us up to speed on everything. I know we got a lot of questions, so I do want to open it up. If you all have any questions that you want to ask the subject matter experts that we have on the call today, feel free to raise your hand using the Zoom feature, and you'll be called to come off mute and ask your question. Or feel free to drop the question in the chat, and we'll read it off and get an answer for you. Alrighty.
Lindsay, great question. Shashonda and we're on the phone till late yesterday about this question this week. And I do want to clarify, technically, there are two bills. Marissa outlined the changes in the House as the first part of the webinar previously. So up until mid-December, late December 2025, environmental issues were considered in Environment and Transportation, and energy was considered in the Economic Matters Committee. And when the change in leadership happened and the shift happened in the new committee, which will be fondly known as the GLEE Club with its acronym, got created, the energy got shifted from Economic Matters to Environment and Transportation of Interest. Housing got moved from Environment and Transportation to Economic Matters. And so energy and environment are now considered in the same committee. We had previously split the bills to cover MDE jurisdiction and the permits therein, and then PSC jurisdiction and the CPCNs, which were for energy generating facilities in that bill. And we had split them into two bills because to respect the Chamber's committee process, because energy was considered in Economic Matters and environment and transportation. That's no longer the case. As Marissa said, come any day you want to be in Annapolis, you can probably find me in environment and transportation. And so they're being introduced as two bills this week, Lindsay. This week, we've been working closely with MDE to make sure the language is, we're all working from the same language. And then, but they're being introduced as two bills, but we're really working. They are the same concept, just addressing permits at two different agencies, and that now both of those agencies are overseen. They have both have jurisdiction in environment and transportation. So sorry, a little wonky. I'm also bad at short answers. Anybody who knows me knows that. So the short answer is this week, and then you got a spoonful of additional information about why it's delayed, and we would have liked to introduce it earlier. We'll share bill numbers as soon as we can. Shoshana, do you want to talk about the types of permits? I can start. You can pop in. The answer is yes. Short answer, yes. At the Public Service Commission, it's just CPCNs, and it is for polluting CPCNs. So solar, wind are exempted. And then at the Maryland Department of the Environment, the bill, not only is it's not the whole state. It's at-risk areas, so which are defined through a number of metrics, including overburden, underserved, EJ scores, and we so there's at-risk areas. So it's the most at-risk areas in the state, and then if a permit application goes in for a certain type of permit in those areas, then it would trigger this additional process. And we've been working hard again to respect the fiscal constraints of the state, and that there's a phased in approach now. So it's not all permits all at once, all year one. Some of these are going to phase in, and the way that those permits were decided were by asking communities throughout the state what facilities they're most concerned about, and then matching those up with the permits that those facilities get. And so prioritizing things like Title V, air quality permits. And so, yeah, there's a prioritization that happened. And there's a phase in approach with the bill. So yes, it is not the entirety of the state, and it is not all permits that are covered. And we can send you the list. Ooh, that's a good question. Lisa, I think on the summit, my understanding is that Sierra Club will be live streaming it on Facebook, which is how you can participate virtually. So check out their live stream on their Facebook.
And apologize for the little blip of web screen on there. That was me trying to look for a link from the Sierra Club because I thought the same thing was the answer, but I can't find a link. So if I find one before the end of the webinar,
I think it's just going to go live.
Okay.
Yes,
so just
as an elder millennial, that's the extent of my knowledge on Facebook Live.
Elder millennial is a new phrase that I love. Does anybody else have any questions? For the balcony solar program, how much does a plug into your wall solar tool cost? Does it require additional purchasing setup to plug it into your wall?
Good question. I don't have those at my fingertips. I can get back to you on that.
Okay. Yep.
But supposed to what the bill does is set up the program, right? So like set up the safety regulations and set up, sort of a balcony solar program in the state of Maryland. But it's a good question about how much it costs, and I just don't have that at my fingertips. I think the whole idea is you can just plug it in. Like there would hopefully be no additional setup is the goal.
And Rebecca, do you guys have like an overview of the structural changes within the legislature?
Do we have like a write-up?
Yeah. Yeah, something just to give people an overview of how things have changed.
Great question. I don't know that we've written it up. It's literally been a month.
Yeah. Good point.
They just did the subcommittee assignments this week. So thanks, Dave. Let's crowdsource the answer. Yes, thank you, Dave. Climate Justice Wing. But the short answer, no, we don't yet have a write-up, but we could certainly try to take what's happening in our brains and in the legislature and put it on paper.
Okay. That sounds good. Eileen?
Just a quick question. In the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act, the bullet it says transportation projects with low or no associated emissions will be funded on balance with projects that increase emissions. And I don't know if you said that or and I missed it, or if you can explain what that is. And thanks for all the information to both presenters. It was really, really helpful.
Yeah, the idea behind that, Eileen, is that we will actually spend the equivalent amounts of funding on walkable, bikeable, all the multimodal transportation projects, as opposed to right now, the way that we spend on transportation projects is really heavy highway.
Right.
And that actually costs us more money in the long run and isn't helping anybody's health or improving our communities in any way. So, so this would get MDOT putting together their budget in a way that really prioritizes multimodal in a way that they don't right now. And
It'll be a big
as
change.
of right now, it would be a big change. It would be great. And as of right now, that department is on board with the changes. They've been in the room, part of the conversation, and comfortable with the language that we're putting forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Lindsay? I see you came off mute, but I can't hear you. It might be my computer though.
No, we can't hear her either.
Thank you. Okay, okay.
There you go.
I'll put it in the chat. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. I've been looking at legislation for a little while in other contexts.
We lost you again. We lost you again. If you put the question in the chat, I think we'll be able to access it. Waiting on it to come through. Alrighty, Sean has a question. I've always wondered if people could simplify, file a city nuisance complaint or civil suit against polluters en masse or one by one, particularly in Curtis Bay, where the homes are covered with coal dust. If every house in Curtis Bay had to be cleaned or repainted or had to be supplied with air cleaners, could it encourage the coal folks to better control their dust? Has anyone ever tried this?
That's a really good question. I do, for each complaint that they have, like there is just like a certain amount that they send for like, um, if there's an explosion, for example, like the explosion that happened in Curtis Bay in 2021, where the coal dust, they saw it leave, and it was a really big deal. We did do a class action lawsuit against the company, CSX, and we did win that as a community. But for dust, like people have been complaining about it for a lot. We have complained to different agencies, including the MDE, about that. But particularly, a lot of these things are not being permitted for those particular things. And so it just makes it really hard for that. And so we're really hoping still that, like, even with the Trash Act, that we can get stricter requirements for these facilities also, because what they claim is that it's not leaving the facilities grounds. And then they also point fingers at other different facilities or the trucks, the diesel trucks, and say like, hey, that's not dust, that's not coal dust, that's this, that's that. And so you have a lot of those issues there. But we have tried those different things. But we have been looking at, again, just litigation period for a lot of these facilities when they are doing these things, like even our medical waste incinerator that hasn't been in compliance, that has black smoke events that we have reported. And so, yeah, we have been trying those things, but it's just not as simple. It's not really easy either. But yeah, but I think we just get better results when it is like things like big explosions that everyone can see, that people can feel, that we can point to.
Thank you, Shashonda, for that context. Lindsay, I don't see your question yet in the chat. Sean says thank you. I think we got about 13 minutes left. We could do maybe, oh, hey Maria.
Lindsay question is in the chat too. I just wanted to point out to you.
Oh, okay, I missed it.
This
Yeah.
isn't directly related, but kind of related to the CARES Act. I wanted to put this on the radar because we just found out that down here they're going to be introducing emergency legislation. I think Regina Boyce on the House side, Senator Mary Beth Carosa on the Senate side, to build chicken houses without having the permit. The CAFOs. So I would like just to put this on radar so that it's supposed to be dropping. We understand anytime this week or next week. And like this is to me a direct assault on the engagement participation because you know we all need just tons more chicken houses down here. So the fact that they can't wait to go through a public process is really disturbing to me. So we're just asking coalition partners for a little support with that if we could.
Thank you for that, Maria. And actually, just before session began, Maryland LCV put in comments with coalition partners on the Maryland AFO permits. That's animal feeding operations that goes through MDE. And that permit has to do with the sort of stormwater and our concerns about water leaving those facilities, as well as air pollution, which is both a problem for the communities around them and also deposits into the water. And so it's a problem all the way around. And we have concerns about how MDE is moving forward with that permit as it is. So very interested to hear in legislation trying to roll back those permits anymore already. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes,
And
appreciate any support.
absolutely. And I don't know if Rebecca wanted to also answer Lindsay's question with me here, but in terms of other bills, you are absolutely right. There will be many other environmental bills. One of the some of the things that you didn't hear about that we do follow are some of the other water related pieces of legislation. And Rebecca was talking about how there will probably be defense on bills that we don't necessarily have details on or bill numbers yet. So we continue to follow the legislative session and bills as they're introduced. In terms of how we prioritize, at Maryland LCV, we prioritize together based on our mission, based on where we think that we can have the most beneficial effect in passing legislation that will also have the most beneficial effect for Marylanders. It's a really hard thing that we do every year because there are so many bills, trying to pick a few that we think we can really be helpful in getting across the line and we think really will make a difference. And certainly would value the participation of any of you in lobbying us ahead of time. It's always a community process to figure that out every year.
Yeah, and we have strategic plan that we work a lot with, and our DEIJ principles, and we sort of bring all of these considerations together as we are defining our priority legislation. But I mean, and there's going to be 3,000, 2,000, 3,000 bills that get introduced. So this is why. And then of those total bills, and then of those, there'll be probably a few hundred that are related to environment in some way, and environment energy. And so absolutely tracking, bringing things to our attention is really important. Your voice is critical. Legislators are responsible for tracking a few thousand pieces of legislation. It does get split up by committee, so the committees, really focus on the bills that they're assigned. But legislators have to track thousands of pieces of legislation in 90 days. And this is why your voice is critical, because you bring these people into office, right? You elect them. You are their boss. Make a phone call to your elected officials because they need to hear from you. Sign on to Maryland LCV's action alerts if you want to have your voice heard on environmental issues. Come to Annapolis for Lobby Day. The more the legislators hear from you, the bigger difference it makes. And so it's so important to get engaged. I have worked, my background is public health. I have seen the difference it makes. My background is public health, but I'm a registered lobbyist, right? Which is great. Like but it's my job to be in Annapolis every day, right? So like legislators trust me, right? I try to bring that reputation, but there's also like that little tiny grain of salt because, like, it's your job, right? When a doctor or a nurse or a pharmacist or a health professional of any public health professional takes time out of their day to come to Annapolis to testify on a hearing, write a bill, call their legislator, their day-to-day job is saving lives. So if they're there to talk about legislation, they're there to save a life. And so having, health professionals weigh in on environmental legislation is really important. If a bill is going to affect you, let your legislator know. I can't, there's no such thing as overemphasizing this point. So please stay engaged. In terms of helping keep folks in the loop about where Maryland LCV is weighing in and how we're weighing in, the Friday digests are a really good way to do that. Every Friday at noon, we go over a topic. This Friday is the budget. We do not have the entire session sketched out for Fridays yet because we don't know what's going to happen yet. So we're going to have late breaking stuff on there. We're going to have leadership come on those webinars. So keeping in touch with us via those Friday digests are really important. Signing up for our action alerts. The environmental community is also, for example, prioritizing the bottle bill. And we know the governor is also going to have an energy bill. So waiting for that announcement and the details there. We'll be sure to share those. And then there is going to be defense on, energy affordability is like the topic. And some people interpret that as an opportunity to bring forms of energy online that are not the fastest and cheapest, but are business as usual. And so defense on legislation is going to be important as well. And so I think that answers it's a partial answer to Lindsay's question, and we hope we can be helpful and be a resource throughout session. Will the new House committee structure help that? Ooh, man, Eileen, can we answer that? Not like am I allowed to, but just like, can I? Well, I think we'll see. The Environment and Transportation Committee is taking on energy for the first time. So we're going to talk to a lot of folks about energy for the first time. I think we don't know yet. We're going to have to see how this session goes. And creating a whole new committee also meant that there's fewer people on each committee, right? And that completely changes the dynamics. When you get to a point where you're thinking about your legislation and you're like literally doing a vote count, there's fewer people to count, and that makes each legislator's vote more powerful on committee. And that is going to be a big consideration. And so and there's going to be new champions who emerge. That's the exciting thing, right? Like you had people who care about energy but weren't on the energy committee. We're gonna be able to see new champions emerge on new issues because of the shakeup. We're also really eager to see what the speaker wants to prioritize, and bringing her background and enthusiasm into this. And so seeing what there's a lot to be determined, and to Marissa's analogy earlier, like the more energy, clean energy feathers we can give people to put in their caps, the better. But we need you on. We can't underestimate that. We can't. There's no overstating that. Well, we cut into our breakout room time, Curry.
It's okay. This happens often where we get a lot of questions, and that's great, right? Because that's why we're here. We're here to learn. We're here to have a space for you all to educate us on all the things during session that we need to be informed. of. And so we sincerely appreciate Shashonda, Rebecca, Marissa. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your deep expertise and knowledge. I'm happy to send out your contact information if you would make it available so that people can contact you, come with you to Annapolis, sign up to do all the things that you guys need community engagement for. And I think that's a wrap for today. Thank you guys so much for coming and spending your lunch with us. I was eating a little bit of grapes over here, so if you were able to lunch and or chat and chew, thank you so much. And you guys have a great rest of the week. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.